When you're dealing with an image like this, which has a lot of colors in it, and if I zoom in, you can see that there are a lot of these kind of gradual tonal changes. JPEG is your best option because it supports millions of colors, and so it can handle this kind of color information very well. So you simply go File, Save As, and you name your file. And then you want to click out of this box. Don't hit enter because that's just going to save your file before you can set your other options. To choose a folder, you just click this browse for other folders and you'll open up this big area. And this is just a basic interface where you can browse to any folder that you want. One thing to watch out for is that if you click on any of these items, it's going to change the name. And that can be quite tragic because if you leave that, then you're going to overwrite this actual file. So make absolutely sure that that doesn't happen. Double check that your file name is different, unless of course you want to overwrite one of these files. And then you can just click this minus button to close that area. Then you select the file type. So we open up this select file type by extension area, and you simply go down the list and find the one you need. So we are looking for JPEG, and I click save. Now GIMP gives me this message asking me whether I want to first import this file. What this is telling me is that if we look at this current file, it's an XCF, which is the GIMP native file format. And for example, I have more than one layer, and the top layer actually has transparency in it. I could, for example, take this layer and move it around, and I can do various other things. I can add effects, I can change the opacity, and there are many other things I can do. What GIMP is telling me is that once this file is saved as a JPEG, you won't be able to have any transparency, and both of these layers are actually going to get combined into one. So you are going to lose a ton of information in this file, and you're going to lose all kinds of editing options. So if you choose to export first, then GIMP will actually create a duplicate of this file and save that as a JPEG, which means that you'll still have this original XCF GIMP file, and if you decide later that you don't like the position of these flowers, for example, you can go back and change it and then resave. If you click ignore, it will simply save this as a JPEG, and you will lose all of this information forever. So for obvious reasons, I strongly recommend always choosing export. Then you get the Save as JPEG dialog box. And here you've got to basically balance out your quality and file size. If you click this button, Show Preview and Image Window, you'll see that it actually brings up this Export Preview window. And if we just move that out of the way, you can see here that if I drag this quality slider right down to 0, this image is going to look absolutely horrific, but it only has a file size of 20 kilobytes. If I go all the way to the top, the image looks absolutely great, but our file size is over 1,000 kilobytes. Incidentally, if this is an image for print, the file size doesn't matter. If it's for screen, you probably want the file size to be a bit smaller than that, but there's an entire video on that specific topic coming up later. So once you've decided on the quality that you want, you simply click Save, and the file gets saved. So I'm going to close that down, and then I'm going to actually go into GIMP, and I'm going to open, File Open, and I'm going to pick sunsetflowers.jpg, and this is the JPEG that we just created. So I click Open, and if we take a look at this file now, as you can see, we've only got one layer, and so if, for example, I take my Move tool and try and move this around, then that's not going to work. Also, just so that you know, in any case where a file has transparency, so you see this kind of checkerboard, if you save that file as a JPEG, that checkerboard is simply going to be filled in with color. The thing to take note of is that JPEG doesn't support transparency, so we can see that Dooney here is in transparent space. If I click File, Save As, and choose JPEG, then we're going to get another warning message. And this is actually giving us two warnings. Number one is telling us JPEG can't handle transparency, that we knew. And the second warning is saying that the JPEG plugin can only handle RGB or grayscale images. So what does that mean? Well, a lot of the time when you're dealing with an image that has no background and some transparency like this, it's what's called an indexed image. So if we look at the image and go mode, we see an image in GIMP can have three modes. RGB, which is color, grayscale, black and white, and indexed is the mode that's used for images that have transparency. So when we want to save this, we need to tell GIMP what to do. It can't save an indexed image into a JPEG. It needs to be either RGB or grayscale. So very simply, if you want the image to be in color, you need RGB, which we do. So I'm going to click export and then save. So if I now close this file and reopen it, here we can see dooney.jpg. Open that file, and as you can see, the background has simply been filled in with white, and if you look at the images mode, we see that it's RGB.